pray about the dead, because I hear that. That's one thing I still have questions about it. I have read it, whether you should pray about the dead or shouldn't pray about the dead and all that stuff. Sorry if I am kind of old, but I am not feeling that great. I'm not sick.
Under the weather.
Right.
Let's start with a word of prayer then. Father, we thank you that we can be here this evening. We ask, Lord, that you guide us as we look into your word, illuminate our minds and hearts, Father, with a greater comprehension of your word, Father, and to apply it properly to our lives. We thank you for your Holy Spirit who guides us and works within our lives to do just that, Lord. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 to 18. So, Anita, you want to read that for us?
Where? From where to where? The whole thing till to
chapter 4, verse 13 to 18. Which is, yes, it's the end of the chapter, yes.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest, who have no hope. We believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring to Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. No offense, but I was reading this the other day. I said, that's going to be some show. So many people are sleeping in. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left till the coming of the Lord, will certainly not receive those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words.
Amen. And we were going to continue verse 14, and I imagine that you may not have brought the sheet that I gave you.
No, definitely.
So I have a...
How to word you so persistent?
You have it?
Oh, see.
Yeah, first, yeah.
Now I even have my son that is after my papers, and after me collecting papers and saving papers. Oh!
No, I keep it in.
Okay, we're going to read that second quote, which is verse 14. Hannibal, on the one hand, you got it?
Do I continue? Or
No, I'll read that.
Okay.
On the one hand, the transformation of the perishable into a spiritual body will be so radical that nothing will remain unchanged. There is no substantial or structural continuity from the old to a new existence. On the other hand, however, the transformation will occur to the same earthly body that we are here. Something different will not be produced in its place. But there's a historical continuity in the sense of continuous transition in the consummation of the transformation itself. The expression historical continuity here means only that connection between the beginning and the end point which resides in the process of transformation itself, regardless of how radically this process may be conceived. Maybe I should stop quoting Hannibal.
Who is this? Who came up with all of this?
He's so intense.
He's so intense.
But of course, what he's saying is that there is continuity between who we are now and who we shall be.
We're not going to be...
But there's also great discontinuity. We will be the same, but radically different. I mean, why can't he say it that way?
Better.
He's German, so we can't. German theologians know how to say simple things in very complex ways, you know?
And not sweet. He's not sweet.
No, nothing like that. Although you'd be surprised when he writes about love. He's been really, I'm shocked that people are not emphasized more how he's really a theologian of love. Because he's written so many things that when he talks about love, you're like, or hope, you're like, wow, this guy. It's like, what?
Yes,
She knows that I post some of his quotes on Facebook because it's just tremendous, some of the things he says. And those are clear. This one's not as clear as the other ones. But obviously, his point is that all this is ultimately shrouded in mystery. We catch a glimpse of what the future will be, what our bodies will be, but only a glimpse. And that almost like a metaphorical language, because had we been there and saw Jesus resurrected, we would have a pretty clear idea of what the resurrection body will be like. But we weren't there. So we're hearing the story about the people who were there, and we're like, and they're even shocked, because remember when Jesus appears to the 12 disciples, at one point, is he a ghost? Is he real? They're not sure. Thomas won't believe it. He touches him. I mean, this weirdness about.
It is weird because he goes through the doors, but now that you bring it up, he goes through the doors, but he can be touched. So
That's
how
right.
could that be?
That's right.
It's actually beyond.
Exactly.
It's beyond our
Comprehension.
comprehend. Thank you. That's a good word. It's beyond our comprehension because we think of ghosts, but then that wouldn't be something you could touch like this.
Yeah. See, and again, because we have a certain mindset about the spatial, temporal environment, and one way that I heard it described well once is that we are literally three-dimensional beings. The fourth, we know length, width, depth, but the fourth dimension is time. We're trapped within the fourth dimension. So time things, like when people say that the light traveled from here to there, it takes 15 years, and you can actually see it over there, even though it happened over there 15 years ago, we freak out. We can't figure out how this works out because we are trapped in the fourth dimension. That's like if you saw somebody who was two-dimensional, and they could see length and height, but they couldn't see depth, and you tell them, oh, look inside the cup.
Oh.
They couldn't see in the cup. They will only see a flatness. We can see inside the cup. They can't. We're stuck in time, so we see these things like, like when people say, oh, that light travels, we are like, huh? Like that the fact that Hubble could look through a telescope and saw something that would have happened, say, 16 billion years ago. The red light of would have been the initial Big Bang.
This is very complex, and today is not my right day to be listening to this. This is the wrong day. Who chose this?
Okay, so what do you rather? Any question on that? I won't take you any further than that.
No, it's okay. I am not the only one here. It's just that, I feel like being,
We'll skip the N.T. Wright quote. You can read that on your own.
Is he any better?
No.
Where's some better?
You know who's really good? The William Lane Craig. I got what you said, and I only saw one, but what's nice about it, I think it was short. So, you could squeeze it in.
Yeah.
And he is very down to earth,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with William and Greg. He's just like N.T. Wright, because what he does on video is all popular. It's to be understood.
It's all what?
Oh, popular.
Yeah, but when you see that he writes books like God as in abstract objects, Platonic books, and you're like, don't buy that book, don't try to read it. I look at them and go,
I'm tempted, but I
no,
shouldn't.
it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
I
know that if I start reading that book, I'll be like, no, I'm going to get a headache. This guy is just, he writes very deep, heavy philosophical stuff, but he's a very good communicator. He's phenomenal. He really can take these complex thoughts and communicate them in a way where people understand and you go, oh wow, oh thanks,
Yeah, that people can understand and not get bored and keep our interest.
Yeah. If you look at N.T. Wright, same thing. If you read his big books are like on and on and on. But when you read his popular books, you're like, wow, pretty cool. So I think these are people that can make. Panneberg never made that transition.
All right, makes sense.
Just
Never
stay
made
there.
that transition.
And he's already with the Lord, so he can't make that transition any longer. So, but okay, we'll go to verse 15. According to the Lord's word.
Verse 15 of.
Yeah, in the book in 1 Thessalonians 4. No, not the. No, I won't read it at N.T. Wright one. You can read it on your own. And I'll certainly pass it on in the notes when I
15 thing about.
Yes. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. Now here we see that the teachings of Paul are not his teaching. He says, according to the Lord's word. These are things that we find in the teachings of Jesus. A number of times, Matthew 24, 25, Luke chapter 12 and 13, Mark 13, Jesus talks about the end times. Jesus talks about the catastrophes that will occur. And actually, to me, one of my favorites is really Luke. Because in the Gospel of Luke, when we studied it, one thing I loved about it is that he divided it. Because in Mark 13, you see Jesus talking about the end times, but Jesus talks about two end times. He talks about the impending catastrophe that's going to come on Jerusalem, very, very imminent, not like 2,000 years from now. And he also talks about something that is coming that is not now. And Luke divides them. So first he talks about the issues about Jerusalem, that Jerusalem, not one stone will be laid on another, all these things are going to happen. And they did happen. By 70 AD, the temple was destroyed, all these things occurred. So within 40 years of the words of Jesus, these catastrophes happened to Jerusalem. But there are things he said about false messiahs, false Christ, all these things occurring, the saints being gathered from four corners of the earth. These things had not yet occurred. And here's what Paul's talking about, that end time, that situation where God will gather the elect. God will bring them together. So, but this is the teachings of the Lord. This is not that Paul is just
coming up.
It's not. Paul didn't just come up with this stuff. This is based upon the teachings. Now, for Paul, the teachings of Christ are primarily being passed on at this point by oral tradition. By the time Paul writes this letter, which is around 49, 50 AD, none of the Gospels have been written yet. Some of the things in the Gospels may have been circulating already, like the Lord's Prayer may be written down, but the Gospels have not been written. The first Gospel written is Mark, and he wrote it somewhere between 60 and 80 AD. So Paul doesn't have that kind of access, but yet it's so well known. The tradition is oral, and people know the tradition of Jesus. They know.
The oral tradition was very accurate, very consistent and persistent,
Yes, because one of the things that occurred in the ancient world, it is an oral culture. And one of the things that was very common was for the students to memorize the teachings of the rabbi.
Could they have been in
Well, of course, they're not going to memorize them verbatim. This is what I love about the scriptures also. If you look at the four Gospels, you see the differences. You see that even though well, first of all, the way they memorized it would have been Aramaic. And because Jesus spoke Aramaic. But yet the Gospels are all in Greek. So already when we have the Gospel, we have a translation of the words of Jesus into Greek. So that that's all this stuff's going on. So all these Gospels are being written for a Greek audience type or Greek Jews, but their basis is Aramaic. And only certain Aramaic words stay, of course, like Abba, because that was so personal, so vital to the persona of Jesus that even when translating, they kept it. Like the Lord's Prayer, teacher praying, and it literally says Abba Patera, Father, Father twice, because it says Father in Aramaic and then Father in Greek.
Comment, question, whatever. The Greeks through the centuries have been whatever they have been. But studying those times, the Greeks very much, we call them intellectual, very much interested in culture and reading and translating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say they are no workers of the street or whatever. They tend to fall in that area of intellectual stuff.
Not all, because of course we're talking, but it's
a tendency.
But but let's not confuse the Greek philosophy and Greek culture with the Roman Empire.
No, Greek.
Yeah, see the Greeks got very sophisticated, very philosophical. The Romans adopted the philosophies and ideas, but the Romans were really pagans. They were very heathenistic, very filthy, very vulgar, a lot of,
But
and-
the Greeks were always more refined.
and they
than
really,
Romans,
what
weren't
they adopted was really from the Greeks. I mean, I'm trying to think of they had philosophers, of course, like Cicero, but he was an orator, Seneca. I mean, they were brilliant minds, but they never, they never produced anyone like Aristotle or Plato, which to me are the two of the most brilliant philosophers, who still influence everything today. And they influenced even early Christianity. They got into the church as well. So, I mean, if you look at the history of the church from the 1st century to about the 10th, 11th century, Plato ruled. Plato was inside the church. And then from the 12th century on, when the works of Aristotle were rediscovered, and actually from the Arabic world. We always think of Arabs like being backward because, oh my goodness, they haven't advanced. Not in the 12th century. In the 12th century, they were on the cutting edge of technology. They were brilliant. And they had these brilliant Aristotelian scholars who brought that into the environment. And Thomas Aquinas got his Aristotelian philosophy from people like Averroes, who were Arabic scholars. So, but this is always, the Roman Empire never produced anyone to that magnitude. So in the Roman Empire, you had thinkers, you had incredible, but the Romans were in that way, very much like Americans. They like to adapt things from other cultures and make it their own. Americans always like to, whatever they find good in a culture, they baptize it, they make it part of their own culture, they take it in. Romans were very good at that. Romans took all those Greek things and they used them, but they themselves were not necessarily up to par. I mean, the paganism that existed there, when you see Paul talking, and he has to mention all these filthy things that we shouldn't do, it's because they're happening. All this stuff, just like a few weeks ago I quoted, for a Roman man, he had his wife, he had his mistress, he had a concubine. A well-to-do man was, had X amount.
What is the difference? Forgive my ignorance, I have never been in this scenario. Concubine and the other one you use.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
You're not an expert.
I'm not sure about the Greek world. I know what a concubine was in the Hebrew world. In the concubine in the Hebrew world it's like an extra womb. For example, Sarah was married to Abraham. Sarah had a slave named Hagar. That's her concubine. If she cannot give Abraham a son, he's allowed to go into this woman, and the child born to them would be considered Sarah and Abraham's child. So,
Weird.
so
I didn't know that.
yeah, it was an extra womb. So if the Greeks make that distinction, then that's what it would mean. That he had for example, basically, it was almost like do whatever you want to, but the wife is the only one that you keep for making sure you have children. That was the main thing. Don't have children outside with a mistress or anybody else. Your wife is. But I don't know what they would consider a concubine in the Greek culture, Roman culture.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up.
Was the concubine was Sarah's?
With what?
Sarah's?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's like a major thing,
Mhm.
and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Right.
But that was very common. Think about it.
And I didn't get it.
The
I
12
didn't
tribes of
realize it.
Israel. They have Leah. I'm about to say, we have a girl in church named Leah, and I'm about to make Leah. Leah and Rachel were the two wives of Joseph. Of Jacob. But they had two extra women who were the concubines. And the 4 tribes come from 4 women, not from 2 women.
Oh.
The
Wow.
cultures and
Just read through it. Read through the Genesis passage. You see how.
Yeah, but I
It's
never.
hard
Yeah.
to
never got
understand,
that.
even if
I
And
you
yet
never-
read
they're
it.
all brothers.
I never got that.
Who?
They're all
They're
brothers.
Of course they're brothers.
They don't speak about being stepbrothers.
No,
They're
they're
brothers.
not stepbrothers. Brothers, because
Yeah, they
it's
talk about
the concubine.
the
and
12
like
tribes
the
of Israel.
concubine is almost like an extension
Yeah,
of the wife.
that's it. That's it.
But it's so different. Those cultures and the way they were handling things
It's very different.
are so different than
Oh yeah.
ours.
That
Is,
it's hard even for us
incredible.
to
Yeah, of course.
and whatever
understand.
is terrible and sinful and whatever Today, before it was very practical. I mean, on those times, no. I'm talking shit, but
Well, no, it was, you know, it wasn't.
serves the purpose of whatever they needed.
It wasn't seen as like sinful or like lewd or wicked. It was a practicality.
It was not
Because
for the purpose of serving a purpose.
because they imagined, I mean, and again, if you have, like Abraham, you have all this wealth, all these things, somebody's going to inherit this. If you don't have a male heir, then your slave, the male slave in your family, the highest one up, will inherit all your stuff. Or in Abraham's case, his nephew Lot would have inherited everything. So this is an issue. That's why, for example, look at Abraham. Despite the fact that God gives him all these things, he says, "What are they to me? I don't have an heir."
Wow.
That, you know, for him, that's the great. That, in that culture, that's the greatest thing. You know, and yet, you know, so it wasn't like something. And you see, and it wasn't considered adultery. It's only adultery if Abraham had gone to a woman that was not his woman. But Hagar is considered part of it. Apparently, he kept a distance because he didn't go to Hagar until Sarah said to him, "Why don't you do this?"
In a sense, things were set up in a particular way for whoever set it up, and they were acceptable if
Yeah.
they were done under certain things. Not for the freedom of doing whatever they wanted.
Exactly. It wasn't
Practical
fickle. There was a real purpose for it, so far as inheritance and issues like that, which don't exist today. And we don't have a problem saying that, well, if I pass away, my wife passed away, and we have something to give, I can give it to my daughter. Back then, that didn't happen. Actually, it didn't happen for the longest time. Even in places like, oh yeah, like, you know, that's why when you see, you guys ever saw like Pride and Prejudice?
Yeah.
I think I saw it, but I don't remember.
Famous author. Oh man, Jane Austen. The whole issue there is that the man has remarried, blah 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 blah, and his wife has only given him daughters. So the property cannot go to him; it goes to another relative who's a male.
Oh my goodness.
So the women are all disinherited because he cannot pass on his property. Legally, he cannot pass his property
Wow.
in the English culture of that time to a female. Has to be a male. So I mean that's heavy
I didn't
stuff.
realize that.
Oh yeah, for the longest time that happened. But well, there you go. A little bit of history everywhere. Okay. Second thing I want to deal with in verse 15 is Paul says, "We who are still alive and who are left until the coming of the Lord." Unfortunately, this verse has been misinterpreted, just like other verses, to make it sound like Paul believed that he would be alive when Christ returned.
Yeah.
And I don't believe.
What verse is that?
Verse 15.
15.
Oh, 15.
Says, "We who are still alive." I don't believe Paul believes that. I believe Paul is just speaking realistically, historically, where he's at. For example, if I was going to say today the same thing, I would say, those who have died will be raised up, and we who are still alive, because I'm alive, how can I think of myself as being dead? So he's talking just because historically that's the way to say it. If I'm going to talk about something where I'm still living, I'm not going to say, oh, I'll be dead, but you guys who are still alive. You know, no. Most people, when they talk about themselves in the present as if they're still here. So Paul's talking about a situation saying, when the Lord comes, those who are dead and we who are still alive. Doesn't mean that he believes that Christ is going to come during his time. It's just a historical way of talking, which is normal under any other circumstances. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because that those who are still alive.
Yeah, he puts himself among the living because he is alive.
Yeah.
He can't put himself among the dead. He's not dead yet. So it's just a grammatical way of, grammatical thing. So,
Wow.
any question?
That's the only place where it said.
No, he also mentions it in Corinthians,
Ah, I thought so.
where he says, "We who are still alive will be transformed." You know,
Really? And that's where it all came from?
and that's why I believe that they believe that Paul believes that he would be alive when Jesus returned.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's true.
but that's just the way you write. That's the way you speak. Everybody speaks that way. You know.
Oh my goodness.
Because that's just the human way of talking. For example, I tell people, look at it, when we still say the sun rises in the morning, even though we know the sun literally doesn't rise in the morning, it's just an expression of our vocabulary is still there and we still use it. That's just the way we talk. So if somebody heard me say, oh, the sun rose this morning, and they go, oh man, my goodness, he still believes that the earth is the center of the and that the sun is actually going around the sun is actually going around the earth.
Kept.
Yeah, it's just, but when you're speaking about a dead, alive situation, you're alive. You're not going to talk. You're not going to refer to yourself as being dead. You're going to say, oh, and we who are still alive, because we're still those who are still here. So, but yeah, that's the big hoopla with that. But,
Wow.
well, like I always say, if you put 7 scholars in a room, you'll get 8 opinions.
Oh.
Seriously.
But this is like basic stuff. I mean, this is not like, I don't know how to say it. This is not like little stuff. I consider this, you know, stuff for all of us. You know what I mean? Not just scholars. I mean, that's a major thing to me.
Yeah.
It would seem.
And I get, you know, could Paul have believed that he would be alive when Christ returned? Maybe. Because the fact is, Paul himself would admit he doesn't know when Christ is going to return.
When he was going to die.
So,
That's right, no one knows.
so yeah, it's a possibility, sure. I mean, but do I believe he really believed it? I don't think so. I think he was fully aware. You know, it's almost like when we hear Martin Luther King Jr. talking, and he says, I've been to the mountain, I've seen the promised land, but I might not get there with you. We understood that he understood the gravity of his life, and that even though he wants to get to that point with them, he sees that realistically he may not make it. And I think Paul realistically realized, although I want to make it, the likelihood is I won't make it. Not because necessarily I cannot live, so I'm going to die. I'm probably going to get killed, you know. And early on, remember, Paul's told, you're going to go to Rome, you're going to be bound, you're going to, you know, all these things are going to happen to you. So he was aware of his possible demise. So, but it's still a possibility. We entertain it. But then when you make all kind of speculative things about it, then it's like too much. It's like, but what else can they do? They got to write books, right?
And sell them.
Verse 16. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first.
Does it mean that he will come with the voice of the archangel, meaning maybe he has a very strong voice, or is that he will come and the archangel will come? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The way it's expressed is a little...
No, there is an archangel.
I know that there's an archangel, but I think I know.
It means that the Lord's return will be pronounced, will be like a battle cry.
So there's the archangel plus the Lord with the...
But here it's pretty certain that it's talking about a particular archangel, because it doesn't say simply an archangel, it says the archangel. And in tradition, in the Hebrew tradition, the archangel was Michael. Michael was the archangel of Israel. He's the one who watched over Israel. And so when he says the archangel, he probably would have meant Michael himself. Again, it's a battle cry. Christ is coming. It's the war of Armageddon. It's the last battle. This is it. And it's like, it's almost like, again, the trumpet call. But the trumpet call and the voice of the archangel are most likely not two different things. It's the archangel himself pronouncing like a trumpet. His voice.
That is strong.
Yeah, that's strong.
A question that not precisely on where we are, but it's part of it. The meaning or translation or whatever you want to call it of angel is a message?
Well, the word itself means messenger.
The word
Angelos.
means messenger.
Yes, that's your name.
Okay. The
You're
other
a
question
messenger.
had nothing to do with this, but it's just that it's a word that Daniel. What is the meaning of Daniel? It might have a meaning.
Oh, wow.
Because that one is an angel. I want to know my two sons. One is an angel and the other
Well,
is
both of them have the meaning of God in their name, because El is God. So I don't know what Daniel means or Gabriel means itself, but the last word El means God. So God something.
You know, it's funny.
both of
I
them
was
have
the
God's
one
name
that
in it.
chose the names,
Mhm.
and my husband never messed up with it.
Mhm.
But I always become a Christian, because I was just thinking that
Like-
what Daniel means what?
like Abigail.
That's
Al is
right.
there too.
It's in there too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Abigail?
Abigail. That's at the end.
Oh.
And,
And it's always at the end.
yeah, normally yes.
Well, like my grandchildren also. Samuel
Samuel
and Gabrielle.
and you got both of them have the
Oh, you
God's
have the
name.
Gabriel too?
They both have God's name in
Yeah,
it.
yeah, so all of us.
Yeah.
All of us.
So it's
And
very.
a feminine one. Angela, do I have God inside? Inside it, or they take me out because
Your name means messenger.
what I'm saying, my name
So your
is
name-
the feminine of angel.
Your name can
angel.
appear in the Bible not simply as angel, sometimes as messenger. So when it says an angel and messenger are synonymous terms almost. But
A female. What happened with the females?
oh no, well, I don't.
Who knows?
Angels wouldn't have gender, so it wouldn't matter. Even though they have names, but
Sorry, but I had.
no,
to
no
think-
problem, no problem.
I have been thinking of that for the past 2 days. I says, I hope I remember.
Actually, I think I no, Abigail is not my father's. No, it's not. There is no L in Abigail. It's my. I know it's my father's joy, or the joy of my father. So no, her name Abi is there. Sorry, her name. When I picked her name has the Abba, the Abi. Abi means my father. My father's joy. That's what finally I said. I said, I like that. No, it doesn't have L. You're right. No L at the end. So yeah. Well, I see all these things had God's name in one way or another put in there. Obviously, Abigail expressing the idea of Abba and God being our Father. But the Thessalonians would understand this language that he's using here with the celebrations that would accompany the arrival of an emperor to a city. Paul describes it with two Old Testament passages in mind. The primary theophany, appearance of God, in Exodus 19:16, where Yahweh's descent is accompanied by a thick cloud and a very loud trumpet. So in Exodus 19, where it talks about God coming, descending down, this kind of language is used of his appearance, of his coming. Also in Psalm 47 verse 5, this coming is rehearsed in song, but now it's about Yahweh ascending to his throne to be victorious and to rule. And both are described in the same scene. One sees it as God descending, the other one sees it as him ascending. Paul is using the language of descending. Only now he doesn't say Yahweh, he says Jesus. The Lord here is not Yahweh, it's Jesus is going to descend. He is coming to us. Archangels are never mentioned in the Old Testament. They are mentioned in the intertestamental Judaism, time between Malachi and the Gospel of Matthew. There's 400 years there, and that's called intertestamental time. During that time, there are writings that mention the archangels. Before that, you never see the word archangel in the Old Testament. It doesn't appear. Only the word like angel. Jewish tradition.
Well, I think, sorry.
Yes.
I don't know. Are they supposed to be considered in the family, to call it something of the angel thing?
Yes, but the
They are
archangel.
related in a sense to angel?
Yes, but archangel, the actual word arche, means ruler. So these are angels that are in charge of other angels. In Hebrew tradition, there were 7 archangels over everything. For example, we believe that Lucifer, Satan, was an archangel. He was a ruling angel like Michael. He was one of the top guys. And of course, he fell. Remember when in Revelation we talked about, it said that 1/3 of the stars fell. That's believed to be the rebellion of Satan. When he went down, he took the angels he had with him. They followed him. They went with him in the rebellion. So he was a top angel. Of course, not the top angel. There's no the top angel.
There's no such a thing as the one that rules.
There's many archangels. We don't know how many actually. Jewish tradition came down with 7. The 7 holy angels for example, the book of Tobit in the Apocrypha, in the Catholic Bible that has the book of Tobit says, the 7 holy angels who present the prayers of the saints and stand before the presence of the glory of the Holy One. So again, the kind of job they had, it was part of their job to present the prayers of the saints, which we saw in the book of Revelation. Remember that the angel brought a bowl with the prayers of the saints.
Yes.
Well, in Tobit, it's an archangel that does this. And he presents, of course, he stands before the presence of God, the Holy One. In 1 Enoch chapter 20, verses 1 through 7, which again is not part of the Apocrypha, not part of the Old Testament of the Catholic Church. They are called archangel again, and they're listed as Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Sariel, Gabriel, and Remiel. So they actually put Gabriel as an archangel in one of these writings.
Gabriel is an archangel?
In one of these writings. Not in the Bible. In the Bible he's never called an archangel.
It's called just an angel?
Yeah, just an angel. He's a messenger. Which of course that's what angel means. Any questions?
Everything's a question.
What's that?
Right.
Everything is a question.
There's so many.
We are in the middle of
A big
so
question.
much.
I mean, you're right. It's just
Well, this is
so
a very
much.
thick passage. Very
It's
thick
so
passage.
much.
And we haven't gotten to the rest of it yet. So.
Oh, shit.
Imagine that.
Don't get too fast.
Verse 17. Any questions then on that? But again, archangel is not a word that appears, remember, it doesn't appear in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, for the Catholics it does.
Why doesn't it appear in the Old Testament, sort of?
It just wasn't used in that time. There was no big focus on that. We talk about the angels. No, we talk about angels, but it didn't get much into. I shouldn't say it didn't get into the order of angels. I shouldn't say that. That would be inappropriate because it did have subdivision of angels, but it didn't have archangels. For example, in the Old Testament we find cherubim, seraphim. We see
those
this.
those are less than angels and archangels.
No, they're not less than. They're different types
different
of angels.
positions.
For example, there are angels, like in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, that literally their whole job, their whole thing, is being in the presence of God, saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." This is it. This is their complete function. Not like Gabriel. Gabriel's a messenger. Gabriel is a guy who gets sent on jobs to go tell this, go tell that. Michael's a guy who ends up in battle a lot. Remember in the book of Daniel, he ends up fighting another angel who's trying to oppose him. Remember if you remember, Daniel was praying and he's asking for an answer, and it takes like 21 days for the answer to come to his prayer. And Michael explains to him that I was coming to give you the angel said I was coming to give you a message, but the angel of Persia, the god of Persia, attacked me and was stopping me. And then Michael had to come and help me and battle him off so I can come and deliver the message to you. Go back and read it. It's fun.
Wow.
Yeah, let's go back and read Daniel and go, whoa, that's a whole spiritual, this is why the Bible says that there's a spiritual warfare going on. We think, nothing's going on. There's a battle going on above us. It's just not simply, we have a spiritual battle here. There's a spiritual battle there as well. And this angelic force demonic force was trying to stop an angel from delivering a message from God. And Michael literally comes in and battles the guy off. And now the angel's able to give his message. So I can't remember the name. The angel who's coming to Daniel is given. I'm not sure if it is Gabriel. I have to look it up. They don't mention his name. But I know Michael's the one who comes in and helps him to ward it off. Any other questions?
Oh, all right. Dead in Christ.
Dead in Christ.
Dead in Christ. Who's that?
Dead in Christ are those who have died as Christians prior to the second coming of Jesus. Everyone,
Prior to the second.
all the
prior
saints.
to the second. Well, the second
Yes.
hasn't happened. So
Yes,
that would be
that
us.
could include us as well. Unless Jesus comes back soon. See, we who are living,
right. Unless he comes back. Okay.
we who are living,
Right. Oh.
we don't know the day or the hour.
Oh, right.
We really don't know.
Right. It
You
could
know?
be. I see why you're saying it could be us.
Yeah. Now, I don't believe it will be anytime soon.
Oh, right.
and we'll get that. We'll go to 2 Thessalonians. Paul says, don't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. I told you there were certain things that were going to happen before, and they haven't happened. Yeah, but the Antichrist, the Antichrist is not risen. So they're right there.
Who?
Antichrist.
Oh.
You know, he hasn't risen yet. So that right there, yeah, we can wait. There's
Do
no.
we have, this is stupid, but do we have any fear that should we have any fear of being here while the Antichrist comes up in the picture?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is there not any point of where we can be relaxed about not having
Yeah. If you
to-
die, you'll be fine.
If I die, okay. I'm not
Otherwise,
I'm
no.
not interested in meeting any of more
This is-
interesting.
This is one of the things that's really messed up when it comes to the second coming of Christ. And I was going to get to in verse 17, so I'll just jump right into it. You know what? In the 19th century, a guy named Darby. The apocryphal story goes that he was sent to see this girl in the hospital who was having these visions, and she saw a vision, and that's where he got the idea, either from her or from himself, that the church was going to be raptured before the tribulation, before anything bad happened, right? That did not exist in the church until the 19th century. Prior to that, you never find any believer believing that they're not going to go through a tribulation. Christians believed in the early church, you know, all except for those who believed that the kingdom had already come, like in the Roman Empire. They believed that we were going to go through the tribulation, through the horrors. This idea of, oh, we're going to have an escape plan, we're going to be taken out. No, no such thing. And we'll see when we look at 2 Thessalonians also. We're going to see it here, but in 2 Thessalonians, when Paul says, you're going to see the Antichrist. Well, if we're raptured, how can we see the Antichrist? How can we see these signs if we're not here? He would have said, oh guys, don't worry about it. You guys are not even going to be here. You're going to be, poof, taken away. No. We're not going to be here. I mean, we are going to be here for the tribulation, so.
Unless we die.
Unless you die. Sorry. Now I've really messed up your day, huh? You want to go back to the quote on Panenberg now, don't you?
Well, the thing is, I'm not very good at any of this ever. But today,
All right, so verse 17.
I'm not in my prime, if I ever have a prime.
After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Obviously, those who go out to meet the Lord is equivalent, functionally equivalent to when Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15 about those transformed. He uses different language, but he means the same thing. We who are taken up, who are alive, obviously cannot meet the Lord in the air with this body. We would die. We would suffocate.
It
We
doesn't
would.
fly.
It doesn't fly,
We don't
and
fly.
we could not breathe. We would die. Obviously, there's a transformation that's going to occur. The bodies will be changed and made suitable to meet Him in the air. But again, no idea here of a rapture, and that's where we get to the word "to meet." This was actually for me. You know, you're talking about going to a tribulation. I was raised in a church. I came to know the Lord in church. It was a dispensational church, and they believed Darby. They believed Schofield that we would not go to a tribulation. I had my Schofield King James Bible with all the notes and all the little charts. And you see there in the beginning we were raptured. Then tribulation would occur. I mean, all this stuff was good. And I believed all this stuff. And during my third year in Bible college, third year, it must have been third year, I was translating. I had really gone up. I was getting better in my Greek, and now we had to translate 1 Thessalonians. And this word was the word that bothered me, began to make me think something is wrong with my theology. Because the word meet, which is where in the Latin is rapere, where we get the word rapture, does not mean to meet in the air and go away. The word means to meet and then come back. And I was thinking, wait a minute, no. We're supposed to meet Christ in the air, then go away for 7 years, and then come back. But the Greek word is not saying that. The Greek word is saying it was the idea that when an emperor came to a city, they would leave the city, meet the emperor, and then come back with him into a city, escort him back into a city.
Oh.
This word is used in two other places where it means that same thing. Remember the bridegroom, the parable of the bridegroom?
Yeah.
They go out to be the bridegroom and then they come back in. Same
Oh
word.
my goodness.
In Acts chapter 28, Christians from Rome walk south of the Appian Way to meet Paul and his companion and escort them back and journey into Rome. Same Greek word. So when this word appears, you see that it's a going out, meeting, and then coming back in. And this is what Paul had in mind. He had no idea of saying, "Oh, we're gonna be raptured, then leave for some years, and then we're gonna come back." And then the end comes. No, he sees like tribulation, horrors, bang, come back down for the war. That's his imagery. It's we meet Christ, and immediately, here comes the battle. Here comes the end time. Here's the end of all things. Very radical, different picture. That's why in the book of Revelation, notice we have gone through so many chapters, we have not seen the rapture. And they try to put the rapture every place. Oh, it happens here, it happens. Because there's no place where you can put the rapture.
But
We are going through the whole thing.
Yeah. Now I understand that word. It's almost like a guest is coming, and we go out, like we're the meeting committee.
That's right.
We go out there to welcome the guest.
That's right.
You know, like even if someone comes to your home, instead of staying in your home, you go out. You know, because you want to escort them in. And
Yes.
it's like, yeah, now
That's
I
the-
understand.
that's the idea.
That's the word. That makes sense.
And again, this theology was very common to believe in the church that we would go through a tribulation. That was the normal view. And it wasn't until the 19th century that things changed. And now we think the normal view is to be taken up and leave with Christ and then come back. That was not. That's been around for 150 years at the most. It's not been around for 2,000 years. So very different. Let me conclude with verse 18, which is important. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. I think that verse is very important because so many times end time talk becomes about charge and discussions and fights. That's not why Paul's sharing these things. He's sharing this so we can encourage each other. The Lord is coming. And no matter what we're going through, no matter how horrible, even though we look like we're about to be defeated, Christ will return. He will be victorious, and we will be victorious with him. This is a message of encouragement. Unfortunately, people are taking end time stuff, and you see more like fights, to people arguing, to people fighting, to people ripping each other apart, rather than encouraging one another with the end times. The end times should be an encouraging message that we will be victorious because Christ is victorious. So it's a very good way to end this section. And he'll do the same thing in the next section. Any questions?
Wow, that was important.
Yeah, it was an important second. I was hoping Arlene would be here,
Yeah,
but
this is so important.
unfortunately she won't. She'll have to get it. She'll have to go for the rerun. Any questions before we conclude? Yeah, this is a very deep passage, undoubtedly. Again, it was a passage that first began to make me question my theology. I didn't change immediately. I never changed immediately. There's no way. I've never been the kind of person that says, "Oh, I got to give it up." But it was a real chink in my armor. I was like, this word bothers me. This idea, and that Second Thessalonians didn't help me when I was translating it either. I was like, this is not helping me at all in my theology. But it still took a few years because this was so embedded in me that I couldn't just relinquish it. I thought it was part of like dogma. This is just the way it is. And when I started studying, then I was like, what? It's only been around for how long? Oh wow! I was shocked. And but an eye opener. Any questions?
Too many to ask.